Good morning, Coalition of Concerned Republicans. And I just have to say that I love our little coalition here. We put together about 80, 90 Republicans here in the Lake County area, make up the Coalition of Concerned Republicans. But I think the statement just really personifies this group of grassroots activists all over the state of Florida that are very concerned about what our government is doing. Today, Chuck Benoit and I are going to go through just some basic underlying truths about what goes on in government and why government is the way it is. And we're going to talk about what we need to do in order to fix it. But the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, as much as we despise some of the things that are happening in government, if many of us got elected to public office, the same kind of things could possibly occur. So today we're really going to focus on term limits. I personally believe that term limits is a mandatory thing for all public office in order to minimize the bias and the proper word is corruption that goes on in our government, but you could soften it up by calling it unethical behavior, because when someone takes a job, their responsibility there in the real estate business, in legal terms, we call it a fiduciary. You have a fiduciary to your constituents, but of course, they would argue, no, I actually have a fiduciary to my municipality, or I have a fiduciary to the county, or I have a fiduciary to the state or the federal government, which is true, actually. So that's just an inherent flaw in the way we're set up. So let's bring Chuck in here and see if we can get Chuck to give us a couple of words of his thoughts on this subject before we dive into our checklist. Okay, Chuck?
There we go. Well, I do believe that term limits is a big deal, very very important. But I am also under the impression that we really do have a term limit situation built into our Constitution. The idea that every 2 years we get to throw out our elected representatives if we're not happy with them. And my opinion is that we, the electorate, we're just too busy enjoying the freedoms of our nation to take enough time to vet new candidates, so we just keep electing the same old politicians. And that's, I guess, my opening remarks on this. We, the people,
Okay.
need
But
to
here's
pay.
the next step. Let me just talk briefly to what you just said, right? Because in its simplicity, then I would agree that what you just said is true. On the other hand, the deck is so stacked against newcomers. Obviously, Chuck, a couple of weeks ago, you and I went through the chronology of the people who have been serving Lake County over the last 4 decades, and they never change. Why is that? Is it because these people are so wonderful that there is no other choice? And that's a deep subject right there that we probably won't even get to today, even though we have quite a bit of time. But if we went into that rabbit hole, then we would realize that one of my key points on this issue is that when those government officials are not replaced, then it just basically robs the rest of the citizenry of their aspiration to rise to public office, because they know that these elected officials are undefeatable, because the deck is so stacked in their favor. And we can talk about all of that, Chuck, which would include campaign finance and all the accoutrements associated with being an elected office. And we could go so deep. We could, that's what's kind of beautiful about where we are on this subject, Chuck, because like in preparation for this broadcast today, I was saying, oh, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? And I'm like, are you kidding me? When you get into ethics and the institutions of government, the dysfunction of government, this is a endless topic, right? I mean, we could do topics on this for the rest of our life, and we'd never run out of material, right? Because it's just so robust, it's so monumental, it's enormous. The amount of dysfunction that is built into what we're doing. So let's talk about it. I made a list, ladies and gentlemen. Chuck, I sent a list to Chuck of just basic examples that we're all going to agree with. But so if it's so basic, why are we talking to you about it? You already know what we're going to talk about. But I would suggest that as we go through this list, you're going to say, you know what? I hadn't really thought about that. And we want you to think about it. Right, Chuck?
There you go. Well, on the top of your list, you're talking about government budgets and how huge they are, and how it's just so easy for anyone to want a piece of the action.
Absolutely. But Chuck, I can't move on without just honoring my dad today.
Okay, please do.
Actually, let's see. He was born in 1936, and so my dad would be 90 today. But today's Erwin Levine's birthday. We lost him back in 2006. So I just wanted to say a happy birthday to my dad, and that'll make my brother really happy, because my brother loves to remember all of our major family dates and stuff like that. So a little shout out to my brother Bill, and we can keep on. So yes, Chuck, the government is a massive budget, and everybody wants their piece, and it comes in so many forms. So many little perks that people get, not only if you're an elected official, but if you're a friend of an elected official, or that's why people go to all of these civic meetings. They go there to get their little piece of the action. I mean, without that, the Chamber of Commerce wouldn't exist. Can you agree, Chuck?
Yeah, I guess to a degree. Also, the residual influence is inherent in every elected position. That's the point you're making. In other words, once you're elected, there are residuals. There are things that continue to benefit you based on the relationships you've built, and possibly extra governmental incomes.
So here's what happens, Chuck. I mean, anybody that's ever sat around a boardroom table, you go to an agenda, and I'm just using this to simplify the subject, but you look at the agenda, but there's so many other things that play into it, right? So that's why, like, for example, this broadcast right now, why is it helpful for people to watch our broadcast? It's because we see something, and then we see the backstory on it. Well, elected officials, especially when they've been in office for a while, they build up a major backstory to every issue that they face. So people want to know what's going on that wasn't said in the meeting. So as we said a week or two ago, that what you see out there is the tip of the iceberg, but the iceberg is underwater. So this is the point here, that elected officials, they get, as you're doing something, run a business, run your household, for example. I mean, a mom, let's just say you're a stay-at-home mom and you're running a household, right? You know what's going on with every one of the kids. You know what's going on with your spouse. You know everything. So mom has the backstory on everything. And that's one of the reasons why mom is so important, right? Is because everybody knows that mom is kind of the orchestra leader, and she knows what's going on behind the scenes with everybody. So she is the one who balances everything. Well, the elected official kind of serves the same role. They've been in this situation. This is about residual influence, Chuck. And they've been in this situation. They know what's going on. They know who the players are. And so, for example, you would think that in government, certainly in government, every single contract would have multiple bids, not only when the contract is originated for the first time, but in every renewal cycle. But I'm suggesting to you that isn't true. Once somebody gets the deal, it's easy for the city manager, the county manager to just renew the contract. The vendor comes back, he adds on a cost of living increase or whatever, they put a new number on it. And then it's just easier. We like this guy, this company, they're doing the job. Why would we go to the trouble of vetting new proposals? But I would suggest to you that it is unethical to renew contracts without vetting new proposals. You should bid these things out at the expiration of every contract, but that's not what goes on. So this goes to the residual influence that these elected officials have, and it extends far and wide, okay? We'll bring you back in, Chuck,
Sure.
so that I don't,
Yeah.
run on and on with that.
Sure, sure. The idea of vetting, obviously, just mentioned that in regard to we the people, the electorate, we're not willing to do it either. So it's probably a little bit more of a human nature thing, that it's just easier to continue on as it is than it is
Sure.
to.
Path of least resistance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
And it's interesting too, there's an economic analysis that says if you're buying something with your money, you pay very close attention to it, right? But when if you're going to buy it and use it and you pay your money for it, you're going to pay very close attention to it. But if you're going to buy it, someone else is going to use it and you're going to pay for it with someone else's money. That's the opposite, right? So that's what government is. The decision maker says, this really isn't my money. And the product that I'm purchasing on behalf of this organization I'm not going to use the product myself. So the quality of the product is not that big of a deal. The price of the product is not that big of a deal because you're buying it with other people's money. So therefore, the intensity of making the right decision diminishes. Right, Chuck?
yeah, there you go. So one of the other points you make here, and I'm not totally sure if I understand what you mean by this, but you say eventually the job defines the person. Why don't you expound on
I'm
that?
struggling with my headset here, Chuck.
Yeah.
These crazy things. I don't know what happens to them, but over time, they're just not as effective. There it is right there. All right. I'm back to 100%. Cool. I can hear you better now. Thanks.
Okay. Well, the point you had made here, and I'm just questioning what you mean. Eventually, the job defines the person.
Right. So again, I mean, in Lake County, it's so obvious in Lake County. Like, for example, you got Leslie Campione and Sean Parks are both running for your re-election after 16 years of service. And, Sean Parks just loves his job as a county commissioner, right? Number one, he gets paid over $100,000 a year for a part-time job. And he'll tell you, he says it all over town all the time. This is a big part of who Sean Parks has become. And I'm not trying to discredit Sean for that. I'm glad he loves his job, because obviously if you love your job, you pay more attention to it and stuff like that. And you can debate the pros and cons of that particular elected official all day long. But that's what happens. So, for example, I mean, look at me, right? I ran a real estate company, and I still do technically, right? But, when I ran my real estate company for 30 years, that was my persona, right? I mean, everywhere I went, people, when I walk into the room, people think real estate and politics. That's it. So basically, your occupation eventually defines you. I used to tell my friends a long time ago, Chuck, I had a bunch of friends who sold timeshare. And I used to joke with my friends, although I wasn't kidding. And I said, everything that you're willing to do to a customer in your timeshare pitch room across the table, when you go home, you're willing to do that with your wife and kids. Eventually it becomes who you are. What you do every day becomes who you are. And that's true in this situation as well. What these elected officials do every day, particularly when they stay in office for so long, right? It becomes who they are. And we're all that way. What we do in our activities every day defines us. And it's just like, when that comes to an end, that's a really hard transition. Let's just say that people were term limited at 10 years, just for conversation's sake, right? And let's just say somebody serves in a particular job for 10 years, and then at the end of 10 years, they don't have that job anymore. That is a major life adjustment. You've built, and, we are creatures of habit, all to different degrees, but to some degree, we're creatures of habit. So, once we get into a rhythm in our life and we take that rhythm away, that is a transition that people have to make. And people don't like change. Can you agree with that, Chuck?
Yeah, I can agree with that. And that's, of course, the point that both of us are continuing to make regarding why we desperately need term limits, because life is just too easy to let things continue as they are. And things continuing as they are brings about the opportunity, not that we're accusing anybody of anything, but it gives the opportunity for graft, corruption, Slapping,
Just
you know,
complacency.
you pat my back,
Taking
I
the
pat
path
you.
of least resistance, right? You just
Right.
take the path of least resistance. That's what people say, right? You know, right? Yeah, I mean, why be controversial if it could cost you your job, right? If I say something that is controversial as an elected official, then I'm going to have people who love what I said because it's controversial, and I'm going to have people that hate what I said. And if the people that hate what I said don't vote for me, then I may not get reelected. But of course, I have all these other accoutrements that help me get reelected, like my name is on the letterhead, my picture's on the wall in public buildings. I do a lot of public service things because we want government to, we want the people to know that government is at their service, which is not the purpose of government. I think you and I would both agree. Yet, we utilize that opportunity to take ads in magazines and put our name on it and put our picture in the ad and say, hey, my name is Mike Levine and I'm elected to XYZ. And I just want you to know that I'm an elected official that's at your service. So here's my cell phone number and my email address. And if you have any questions or concerns about anything going on in my realm of government, then please contact me. And people look at that, oh, what a great guy that guy is. La, la, la. And you know what? I don't know any of the other people on the ballot, so I'm going to continue to vote for the guy who put the ad in the magazine on taxpayer dollars, by the way, and did a nice ad campaign using government money, and basically built yourself, and electioneered on government money and pretending that this is some kind of public service, right? And that's how it gets entrenched and embedded, and no one is going to walk away from that cush job, which includes very lucrative salaries and benefits today, Chuck, if there's not a mechanism in government that doesn't force that to happen. Otherwise, these are kings, and they will continue to serve for as long. Honestly, in Lake County history, people die in office, literally die in office, right? I can give you specific examples of people who served on the public dole right up to the day they took their last breath, right? And of
Right.
course, we're seeing that right now in government with Mitch McConnell. Dan Webster just checked out because he could no longer show up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where we are. I mean, that's just the reality of it, ladies and gentlemen. Who knows? If you or I were in office, we might do the same thing. So why don't we do this? Why don't we just build into the system a component that prevents that from happening? And that's called term limits. And I understand the arguments against term limits, but for me personally, if I have a choice, which I do, of course, my friend Chuck just told me that I can just not vote for people who have overserved, right? And I tell you something, anybody who served 10 years in government, they built so many business relationships, no matter what business they're in, that they can easily walk away from that job and make tons of money based on the relationships they forged and enhanced during their time in office. So these people have already experienced huge advantages over everyone else just by their service, even if they took great pains to be ethical about it, Chuck.
Yeah. So, one of the things we've talked about is this concept of and the impact on entire industries, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we have someone that's been in office for a decade or more. There's just all kinds of industries that they've impacted and influenced, and could possibly get favors for the rest of their lives from. But the next point on our little list here,
If you don't mind, Chuck, before we move on,
Okay,
I just
sure.
want to refer our viewers back to the Danny Perez video we did Tuesday,
Okay.
because that's a classic example, right? I mean, Danny, and you know what, Chuck? We put the wrong title on that video. We should have said Danny Perez gives us a master class. We said in influence something, and we should have said influence peddling,
Peddling.
because that's what it is. Influence
Okay.
peddling. Go
Okay.
ahead, Chuck.
All right. So the next point is the idea that the price of a politician is a great investment. So why would these special interests
Yeah.
be all that interested in new and different politicians?
Okay, so Danny Perez has been nominated to be the ambassador to Brazil. He knows nothing about Brazil, doesn't speak Portuguese, none of it, right? He's a lawyer. So let's assume that Danny Perez gets confirmed as our ambassador to Brazil. He's a lawyer, right? Do you think that Danny Perez and his law firm are going to do all kinds of global legal international law suits and law cases and stuff like that? Of course he is. And what's he getting? So what's he going to do? How does he going to actually serve his customer? Right? He's going to go down there and he's going to hire lawyers who do know what they're doing. And he's just going to skim fees off the top of all that. And it's all fine because this guy's an ambassador to the United States. He was a Speaker of the House in Florida, keeping in mind that the state of Florida could possibly be in the top 10 of the size of all economies in the world, including countries, right? Although not Apple. Private sector companies today have more money than government does. That's kind of interesting, you know. But anyway, so that's kind of the example that I'm talking about, right? It didn't take Danny Perez 10 years to parlay himself into that role, but you know, he's going to be, you know, of course, he'll bring his own personal interest to the table as he's negotiating on behalf, you know, both his public and private accounts, right? You know, he'll look at the interests of the United States of America to the degree that the President of the United States is willing to hold him accountable for that. And again, the President of the United States is going to stay out of it unless it's impactful on his, and I'm talking about Donald Trump right now, but forget about who the president is. You know, the president is going to, you know, rely on the ambassador to kind of keep us between the lines, but he's probably not going to, unless it's a really, really important country, and Brazil certainly is, but there's a lot of moving parts there. So the president probably isn't going to micromanage the ambassador. If he has to do that, he's selected the wrong person. So he's only going to and get himself involved in things that are of critical, urgent, and publicly visible issues. So really, and that kind of goes to the whole thing, what we're talking about, that once you've served for a while, you get this influence, then you're a great investment for an industry. So for example, you know, it's amazing to me. I'm in the real estate business, and I see it all the time in residential property. So a long time ago, there became a law was passed in the state of Florida that had, you got to put a child safety fence around your pool, or you've got to have an audio system, you know, attached to your sliding glass door or whatever it is, you know, your door that leads to the pool deck. How much money did people make selling child safety fences and audio alarm systems for swimming pools? Septic tanks is another one, right? You go back and they pass a law that says you got to have your septic tank inspected every 5 years. Well, how much revenue is generated from that? Then I'm in the real estate business, and many other people have to have licenses to do what they do. So because you have to have continuing education, how many cottage industry schools opened up to provide those educational, you know, continuing education credits? And now you don't even have to sit in a classroom or any of that. You know, you just do it online. So people are sitting here with an electronic tool. You know, you go in, you read the question, you read the background material, you know, fill out the form online, and the school gets paid, and they're all laying on the beach, you know, doing this stuff. They show up every couple of years to update the material because they're required to. They update their website, and they go back to the beach, and they make money skimming off of that, you know. So the point is that industry makes so much money when you expand all of the revenues across large populations of people who are statutorily required to purchase these services. That is, I mean, $1 million is chump change for an industry that generates trillions of dollars, or certainly tens of billions of dollars in income. The price of buying a politician is cheap, Chuck.
Yeah, so you know, our founding fathers obviously never really expected a politician to be, you know, a lifetime goal, or a particular a lifelong ambition. They expected our people to serve office, you know, for a little while and go back into wherever they actually made a living. And you know, what's happening right now without term limits is that you know, it's keeping keeping it's I guess not allowing for the opportunity of other good people to get involved. So there's plenty of excellent people out there who could possibly make some really wise choices, but it's just too hard for them to break in. So they just keep doing their job.
It's not worth it, Chuck.
Right.
I mean, most people will not disrupt a cash flow in order to go do public service, right? I mean, the best people, I say the best people, I have to be really careful that the words that I say actually reflect, what I feel, what I believe. I mean, like, for example, for me personally, the guy that makes the most money is not always the best guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, good people who make a lot of money will look at this public service. I talk to people all the time and says, you got to be nuts. I don't know why you're doing that, right? It's crazy, right? I mean, you've walked away from so much income because this is so time consuming. Nobody pays us to do what we do, but here we are twice a week. And, there's a guy that told me that for every hour of camera time, there's 10 hours of preparation behind it. And I think that's pretty true. So, when you get into it, so the point is that people who would bring a really lot of deep insight and expertise to running organizations like municipalities and counties and states and countries, they just say, hey, it's not worth it. I'm making a ton of money over here. My family told me before I ran for public office, they looked at me and said, you're out of your mind. They said, these people are going to drag you through the mud.
And
which
they
is
did,
exactly
right?
what happened. Which is exactly, yeah, I know, and again, anyway, so I won't get too deep into that either, but there's a big price that people pay when they expose themselves to the political system. And then you take the revenue loss because you're not applying your talents, your skills and talents to things that are maximally productive, the highest and best use of of a person's skill sets. And people look at it and say, but for me personally, I just look at it and say, if we don't fix this, then we're going to leave a country for our kids and our grandkids that is untenable, right? I believe that we are on the precipice of, and as a lot of people watching this broadcast agree, that we're sitting here edging on communism. And that's what the President of the United States is telling us, right? I mean, so it's not just me. And whether you like Donald Trump or not, right, he's got a pretty good view of what's going on. Certainly, he's changing the entire world every single day. So I would suggest that he has some pretty deep insights into what's going on. And the president's warning us about communism. And then, of course, you can take Zoran Mandami from New York, and you can see New York is turning into a communist city. And that's just a great example of it. You can take Minnesota, California, example after example with waste, fraud, and abuse. And, you can take the whole USAID thing and so many examples. It's unbelievable. That's the reason why we're talking about this today, Chuck. And this is why people need to be term limited out of government. Congress, senators in particular, there has to be turnover in those jobs, Chuck.
Correct. And as we move into our waning last moments, I'm going to just drop down to the bottom. Public jobs come with public pensions.
Well, that's the flip side. So we just got done talking about people who should be in office but aren't because they make so much money and they have such great lives now. Why would they expose themselves to the dirt associated, to the nasty business practices of politics? Then there's the other side. Here's somebody who has never done anything in their life. They've never run anything. They've never demonstrated any particular ability that is useful to running a government, yet they sign up because they want the paycheck and the pension, right? I mean, you could apply it to any government job. And, and once you get in, Chuck, we all know that the chances of getting fired at a government job is really, really low. I mean, government just continues to grow their budgets to accommodate mediocrity in the workforce. So, this people who have never accomplished anything, they're, parents teach their children, get a government job. And of course, if you get an education, even greater, you can, you can get a higher position in a government job, based on prerequisites and stuff like that. But it's amazing how people who, probably the least qualified people in many cases, are running the government because they've never done anything else. They don't know what it is to turn a profit in the private sector or to make business decisions where there are balance and counterbalance consequences about the decision you make, right? Okay, I'm a department head in government. Should I fire this unproductive employee? You know what? I really don't have to fire the employee. I'll just build in another position in my next budget request, and I'll just put on another employee that'll offset the mediocrity or lack of performance of the employee that I already got. So now I'll have 2 or 3 people doing one person's job, and it's no big deal because we're spending other people's money, Chuck.
There we go. Well, we are out of time, and I'm just going to make a quick comment. We are in the primary season, and we're going to be we are already getting deluged with mail pieces. And I just want to just note that, we may be too ready to believe anything bad about another candidate. And I feel like we look to the candidate's opinions and choose the guy who says the most bad things about his opponent. And I just feel like we should be looking at those mail pieces and looking at the positive things that candidates say about themselves. And then when it comes time to reelect them, choose based on whether or not they've accomplished those promises. So with that said, Mike, why don't you give us your final?
Well, on the point that you just made, Chuck, I don't think, people that are self-ingratitude, oh, I'm the best, I did this and I did that, that's not really what I want to hear from a candidate. I want to hear about policy issues. If you elect me to a certain position, these are the things I'm going to do for you. From a policy perspective, things we can hold them accountable for. I really don't care who their grandfather was or their great-grandfather. Their father was an influencer of the founding fathers and signed off on agreeing to the Constitution in a different state or whatever. I've got a couple of different friends of mine who are, I say friends, people that I know, who have those kinds of lineage, family history and stuff like that. That's not a reason to elect someone because what your great-great-great-grandfather did. That's just not important to me at all. I want to know, my eyes are in the front of my head, Chuck. I'm looking forward. Yes, of course, if we don't study history, we're destined to repeat it. I understand that. But the fact of the matter is that somebody's great-great-great-grandson or daughter, based on just their family lineage does not make them a great leader. So I don't want to hear anything about that. I want to hear about what you're going to do for us when you get elected in this term. And if it's a 2-year term, you got 2 years to get it done. If it's a 4-year term, 4 or 6, whatever it is. So I'm not really personally that interested in people's resume, to be honest. I'm really very interested. And of course, you got to evaluate their ability to carry out, the things that they're promising you. But the truth of the matter is, like in this particular election cycle, what I take away is, Chuck, that we really don't know too many of these people at all. I mean, we sit down, we have lunch with them, they bring them into a forum, they spend 30 minutes, giving us a rundown on who they are, their whole biography and their history and all that kind of stuff. But we really don't know who they are, particularly people who have never held public office before. And again, I'm in favor of electing people who have never held public office before. That's not my point. But I'm more interested in your policy positions and, your understanding of how government works and what you can do to make life better for median household income families, I will reiterate, Chuck. So, that's kind of my closing remarks. I think that people who get elected to public office ought to serve the people in their districts. And I'm telling all the candidates that are running that I talk to that my personal number one priority is, what can you do to improve the quality of life for median household income families? I haven't had anyone that disagrees with me that is the best way to serve the largest swath of American citizens and Floridians, Chuck, is to improve the quality of life for median household income families. And by doing that, you improve the quality of life for literally everyone, Chuck Benoit. Those are my closing comments.
Well, thank you, Mike Levine, and thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at RestoreOurRep76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program, and remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.